Welcome, guys, to our second episode of Crypto Visionaries. With me today, we have Mrinal from CasperLabs. So let's get into it. So Mrinal, first question, just for people who don't know much about your project, do you mind explaining what CasperLabs does exactly?
Yeah, CasperLabs was built from the ground up to be, an independent project that's not a fork of any other chain, to solve the core issues that have prevented real widespread enterprise adoption of blockchain technology. And, we can go into detail into any one of those, but really the four core issues are: one, the ability to scale without sacrificing decentralization or security. Two is ensuring that your tech stack looks familiar to what enterprises are used to. Three, giving people the option between private, public, hybrid networks, similar to what AWS did for cloud computing. And four, making sure there's a phone number or email address that you can call if you need help with an integration.
Yeah, definitely. What's been some of the common issues that you've seen so far from the enterprise side, as far as how they understand crypto, everything going on in the news, whether it's Trump or Elon? How has that affected the perspective that these enterprises take on blockchain when you have these conversations with them?
Yeah, I think, the noise from Twitter, whether it's Trump, Elon, etc., actually has had minimal effect on enterprises. And I'll tell you why. Because they're less, other than enterprises that are themselves buying cryptocurrencies for their balance sheet. But in terms of adopting blockchain technology, really, they're trying to solve business issues, augment their offerings, reduce cost, bring new features to their end customers. And there's nothing in these tweets regarding, valuation, et cetera, that really changes that. So in terms of actually adopting the technology, there hasn't been that much of a reaction to the noise out there in the market.
Okay, that's interesting. What makes Casper different from other proof of stake blockchains or other enterprise solutions that are out there?
So let's start on the proof of stake side, and then we'll talk about enterprise specifically. So on the proof of stake side, we really don't sacrifice decentralization or security in any way. So, there's lots of things that other protocols do that sacrifice one, typically both at the same time. So any form of delegation, like a delegated POS, any form of counsel, any form of random sampling of the validator base. All of these are either statistically decentralized or statistically safe, but they're not provably live, safe, and fully decentralized. And the way we've been able to do that is we took some of the original research that came out of Ethereum, CBC Casper, open source research that was released by the Ethereum Foundation, and augmented it. We were really fortunate to have Dr. Daniel Kane and Dr. Andreas Fuckler and members of the team at Cardinal Cryptography work on an augmentation we call the Highway Protocol, or R variant of CBC Casper, which is both provably live and safe. And really fortunate that we had a trail of bits audited. And so that's where we're different on the proof of stake side, in the sense that we're not looking for, hey, what's that little trick we do that's slightly different to get scale? We're like, no, let's just do the old-fashioned thing and just find an engineering and theoretical solution. On the enterprise side, we're different in a few key ways. And so I'd say it boils down to three. First, since we're not a fork of a chain and we built this from scratch, we ensured that we embraced open programming standards. And so people can program in Rust, TypeScript, AssemblyScript, and over time, pretty much any language that compiles down a WebAssembly bytecode, which is pretty much 95% of the languages out there. This means your standard IDEs work. You can use Visual Studio, you can use IntelliJ. You don't need, an enterprise doesn't need new tools or to hire a whole raft of new developers to learn a new language, because this will just fit within their system. We also have things like continuous integration and continuous deployment, which are really, really valuable to enterprises. Secondly, Let me start with an analogy here, because I think that's valuable. The problem with the reason why cloud computing sort of saw a J curve at one point was actually at the point where you didn't have to kind of choose between I'm all private or all on public cloud. You were able to mix and match your IT infrastructure as you saw fit. So if you look today, actually, every enterprise solution is hybrid. There's some form of data that they keep completely private, and there's some form of data that they're okay farming out to, a public cloud. And this also, there's compliance reasons for this. And using the Casper network, you can have a private instance and get all the benefit of protecting data that you don't want to ever escape the company for compliance or whatever reasons, but also get all the benefit of the public network for trustlessness, audit, or if data needs to be shared across counterparties. And we think this is really, really important, because the way enterprises engage with any technologies, they dip their toe in the water, and then they increase their usage. And that's where we're different. We're not saying, well, you have to be private, you have to be public. We're saying you should get the benefits of both and mix and match as you see fit. Obviously, the network itself, the public Casper network that the Casper Association manages, is 100% open, permissionless, decentralized. No one controls it. But we're saying an enterprise can have, their permissioned instance that also communicates with a permissionless open instance. And then finally, third, the way we're structured is different in the sense that, we're primarily an equity company. That's CasperLabs, the for-profit. And we provide professional services and consulting to enterprises that want to onboard a blockchain solution. And this is really necessary, because what's very important to enterprises is ongoing support, ongoing maintenance. Without this, they have shareholders, they have customers. They cannot make a decision on what infrastructure to use without knowing that it's going to be supported long term. And we've structured ourselves to ensure that we're able to do that.
Yeah, so it sounds like you guys have structured it in a way so that it's more of a seamless integration for like more on the franchise, sorry, on the corporation side. Like it's easier on the enterprise side, sorry. It's easier for them to integrate with your blockchain technologies versus trying to start out, forcing blockchain on the enterprise side. It seems like you guys did the reverse, where it's like we took the enterprise and then we sprinkled in some blockchain to make it like a smoother transition for them, whether it's like the multiple languages that you support, but also like the package that you bring with it, the ability to call you, the consulting side of things.
Yeah, it's really important, right? Like an enterprise wants to last decades or centuries, and they're like, okay, I've picked a technology. Do I know it's going to be supported? Do I know I can upgrade it? Do I know it's if I need to call someone on an issue I have, is there someone who can help me maintain this? And we think that's really, really important to the ecosystem.
Yeah. So it sounds like a really good solution. So my next question would be, what utility does the token itself have, or what's the benefit of having a token, of Casper having its own token versus using something like a stable coin, if it's for payment settlements on the blockchain?
Yeah, and I'll address the stablecoin point, because that's actually a really important point. But first, the native token does two things. It pays for underlying computation, similar to paying gas on Ethereum. And so, every transaction or smart contract that's executed, any data that's, broadcast to the blockchain requires some level of computation. And based on the complexity, there's a certain gas fee. Because our energy footprint is really, really low, these gas fees are also, by extension, really, really low. But the second point is also, it's the staking token, meaning since we're a proof of stake network, it's what secures the network, meaning all the validators are required to bond a certain bond their stake, and they get rewarded proportionally for uptime, processing transactions, and being a good actor in the ecosystem.
And the second point you're
doing. Yeah, and on the stable coin, so that's the reason why you need the independent thing, right? You need it for both the staking as well as for paying for the underlying computation. stable coins are very, very important for any ecosystem. And we'll be making announcements soon. There are a bunch of stable coins that will be coming on to the Casper network. People need to be able to predict and budget things, especially, if they're having a payment system on the blockchain, etc. But that doesn't take away the need for a native token that's required for compute and staking.
Gotcha. Okay. So what's the future of enterprise in blockchain? What's kind of like the ideal outcome, or what's like the utopian scenario that you'd imagine?
That blockchain becomes, a part of the tech stack. And I think, this view that, blockchain can replace everything is not 100% right. It's an amazing technology. I think it's going to be one of the biggest revolutions we've seen, but it's part of the tech stack, similar to how databases are part of the tech stack, similar to how CRM is part of the tech stack. What enterprises can really, really gain from blockchain is, one, immutable trust, two, replication, meaning if there are assets you want to, replicate across infrastructure, blockchain just does that automatically, as well as great timeline delineation. And so this is applicable to hundreds, if not thousands, of use cases. And it's very, very powerful. But the utopian scenario is that every enterprise worldwide, similar to how they use some form of database today, uses some form of blockchain to get the benefits I just elucidated. Also, we're just getting started, right? We don't know what else we can do with this. I mean, if someone told us, 15 years ago, all the things that would be happening on a phone, we wouldn't have believed them, right? So we're just scratching the surface here. But yeah, the utopian view is really that it becomes part of the tech stack. It's like, no company thinks, should I use a database, right? They all do. And so, it's no longer a question like, should we be thinking about blockchain? It's just like, yeah, it's part of the tech stack. You need it.
What's been like the most unexpected use case or application that you've seen for like blockchain, or like the most creative, something that you wouldn't have thought of?
Something that we wouldn't have thought of, but actually just happened recently, is document signing. I mean, if you think about it, it's such a good use case for blockchain, right? Because imagine two of you have DocuSigned or HelloSigned a document, and imagine you could drop a PDF and it queries the blockchain and says, yep, this PDF was signed by XYZ and on this date, and here's the timestamp. You can look it up on the block explorer. That is so powerful, because if someone even changed one character on that PDF or spoofed it in any way, it would not reconcile. And so now the need for a lot of government agencies, notaries, etc., need all these bells and whistles in order to approve a document. But now an electronically signed document just has so much more veracity. There's actually a product that's been released called Casper Sign, which actually integrates fully into HelloSign. And so if anyone wants to check it out, you can go to app.caspersign.io and have your document HelloSign on the Casper blockchain. It's integrated with the HelloSign infrastructure.
Cool. What about outside of your own project? What are things that you've seen that have been pretty interesting?
Yeah, what's been really interesting is I really think decentralized exchanges have been really, really interesting. It's happened a lot faster than I thought it would. I think the idea of a decentralized exchange is actually really, really great. I thought the uptake would actually take a while, but things like Uniswap and other swaps out there have been extraordinarily successful and bringing tons of liquidity. That's been really, really interesting, especially the pace at which they've exploded.
True. I think so. That's a good point. I agree with that as well. Um, so tell us, what's a typical day as CEO of Casper Labs? What does that look like for you? What is it that you do like each day, typical day?
I don't want to punt and say that there is no typical day. Every day is very different, but um, you know, I I spend most of my time with the team and with our partners. So I'd say I spend about half my time talking to partners. That's, enterprises that are looking to build, trying to plan out how we can best help them. And then the other half is with the team. We make decisions around engineering. It all comes down to prioritization. You can't do everything because you don't have unlimited time and resources. And so spend time with the engineering team, helping talk through some decisions, spend time with marketing, BD, etc., just figuring out how to prioritize things. But they're long days. I'm usually up at the crack of dawn, and I'm usually asleep pretty late, well after midnight.
I see. And what was like what was your first introduction to blockchain? So how did you first hear about it? How did you first get your head around it?
Yeah, so let's start with my first introduction to distributed computing was actually in the early 2000s while I was an undergrad. I contributed some open source code to the BitTorrent project, primarily on things like magnet linking, etc. So I was already hooked on distributed computing. If you think about it, BitTorrent was really the first, truly decentralized system for file sharing, and I was fascinated by that. In 2010 is when I discovered Bitcoin. A friend of mine was actually a very large miner at the time. He actually told me, "Hey, you want to buy some from me?" There was no Coinbase or anything in 2010, right? You had to literally know a miner almost to get some. Stupidly, I didn't in 2010. Luckily, though, he was fairly persistent, and so around 2012, I started, getting into it, buying some Bitcoin, and then sort of became an angel investor in the space. Just invested in a bunch of protocols at the earliest stages, and so yeah, that's kind of how I got hooked. Still kicking myself about not investing in 2010. That was a good time.
Well, it beats me. I only heard about it in like 2017 after the movie Dope. They mentioned it in like the movie Dope, and then that's how I caught the reference. Like, what is this all about? And, like, I got into it way later, but yeah.
Everyone's still early. Like, sure, a decade ago was super early, but this is like the internet before Netscape. Like the Netscape moment hasn't happened yet, and so everyone's early. Like if people think oh my god, I shouldn't bother about this, I missed the train. You didn't. There's a lot more to come.
How do you think? How do you think the long-term effects are going to play out? Because like with the internet, we saw that it kind of became a winner-take-all scenario. So like it was just based off the network effects. Like that's why the bigger got bigger. Like Amazon got so big, Facebook got so big, Google got so big. With crypto, though, it's kind of like the opposite. Everything's decentralized, and things are meant to kind of be more on an equal playing ground. So, do you think things will play out in a more equalized manner in crypto, like 10 years from now, or do you think that there still will be projects that have like better UX and just are easier for adoption, or that just have better marketing and that end up gaining more market share, kind of thing?
I think so. I'll have two perspectives on this. One, it's just unfortunate like nature of markets and how they work, right? Some will be larger than others. I think that's just inevitable. But if I were to make an analogy, I do think that cryptocurrency is closer to Linux than it is to call it, the Amazon, Facebook, etc. Meaning the ones that have real traction are very open source. And if you look at Linux, we have hundreds of distributions. Many of them are extremely popular. And for Debian, Red Hat, SUSE, there's tons of them out there. And I think we'll be more similar to Linux. Even there, you have ones that have significantly more share and are used significantly more. But you've seen surprises. Some people come in with like Debian is used really, really widely now because of core innovation they brought to that distribution. And I think it's similar here because it's open source. There's the natural tendency toward disruption, and so complacency is harder in this industry.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So with that, kind of like, what's your strategy for developer adoption and attracting developers to your platform in a competitive space?
Yeah, so I'd say first it's the product, right? And then I'll talk about specifically what we do. But the product really matters because which developers are you targeting? And our view is, well, all 30 million of them. So that's why we embraced open programming standards, right? So it's Rust, TypeScript, and AssemblyScript today, soon to be followed by a bunch of other languages, which really opens this up to a wide swath of developers, and especially those who have never interacted with blockchain technology yet. It's actually funny because in the industry, it almost looks like we're all chasing the same developers, and we're like, well, there's 99.5% of them that's never used a blockchain product. Maybe we should be targeting them. And then to target them, there's three things that we're doing. First is, of course, through our advisory network, we've been able to interact with several enterprises and companies, and directly interact with their developers. If you go to blog.casperlabs.io, we've announced these partnerships. We've had about 14 to date. Really excited when those start releasing and people can actually see the underlying product and what it does. The second is hackathons, and we'll be announcing two pretty large ones coming up in the next. We'll probably announce them in the next few weeks or so. And we think hackathons are a great way to get developers, engaged. And these hackathons will be pretty broad, not just crypto. We think we should target, the Rust community as well, which is a pretty large and thriving community. And we could also do things, at places like AWS, Interact, etc. And then finally, we're one of the sponsors of the Developer DAO. If you go to devxdao.com, devxdao.com, you can apply for a grant. So if you have a great idea on an application, an open source application, you can get a grant from them to build it out. Or if you have a great upgrade proposal for the network itself, you could get a grant. And so that way, the association, thanks to the forward-thinking nature of the nonprofit association, which I don't work for, they had the foresight to ensure that this developer DAO is well-funded and could ensure that grants are continually given to people willing to innovate on the network.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of innovation, like how big of a role or how much focus does Casper put on kind of like the environmental friendliness or the energy consumption aspect of like the blockchain? Like how big of a focus or priority is that with your company?
It's an extremely big focus right from the beginning, and for two reasons. There's two, and I think people only think of one or the other of these two reasons, but there's two really big reasons why it has always been and continues to be really important to us. The first reason is your cost of transactions is always going to be some derivative of energy consumption, irrespective of how you do it, whether it's you're hedging against that via inflation or transaction fees. Someone's paying for it on the back end. And so every transaction you do is directly correlated to how much energy is consumed. So if you actually want gas prices to go down, if you actually want transaction fees to go down, you have to consume less energy, because that's your major input cost. And the second thing is ESG regulation. Shareholders are holding corporations more accountable every day for the energy footprint of the decisions they make. And therefore, it's a big criteria for them when they're thinking about what kind of infrastructure to use. And similarly with governments. And so it's been a core focus for us. You can go to our blog. There's a write-up on our energy consumption versus other networks. We're several orders of magnitude more energy efficient, of course, on the proof of work networks, but also relative to most proof of stake networks. So this has been a real focus for us. And of course, the innovation we've done here, it's all open source. We'd love for other blockchains to look at it and ideally take it seriously, because as an industry, for the two reasons I outlined, it's really important that this is not a sideshow, that this is actually taken as, the meat of what we're doing.
Yeah. And I can imagine that's been like really the enterprises have been really receptive to that, right? It must be just an easier sell for them to get involved with your blockchain services, right?
It really is, because again, every CTO, he's like, my CEO is going to ask me like, what's the energy footprint of doing this? And it's much easier to say, well, it's actually about as low as it can get right now. And yeah, it's a big factor, especially for existing businesses that already have a shareholder base.
And can you speak on what kind of businesses you guys are in talks with, or like corporations that you might know?
Yeah, and again, a lot of the details are on our blog, but I can talk about two or three in particular. There's tons more in the pipeline, but we'll announce it when they're ready to announce. But a couple that are super interesting are IPWE. IPWE, along with IBM, is building a patent marketplace where people can buy, sell, license patents with each other. And that's a really, really exciting use case for us, because the ability to have what's a butterfly network, it's tens of thousands of companies and 200 odd patent offices worldwide, to collate that in one place and make sure anyone can track and trace who owns a patent, where the license is really, really valuable. And so that one's really cool. And also, that was a great way to show what like a hybrid network can do, like where you can keep some stuff private, information like what did company X pay to company Y for the patent, while still completely exposing to the public network who owns the patent, who has the license on the patent. And so that one's really cool. Another one that we're really excited about, we're excited about all of them, but just to give a slightly different use case, is Quest Global. Quest Global is a multi-billion-dollar software and services company, primarily around supply chains. And they do supply chains for the aerospace industry, medical devices, where the risk of counterfeit is pretty damn high. You don't want a bad turbine to go on a plane. The consequences could be pretty bad. And as you can imagine, the amount of manual overhead it takes to ameliorate those problems is really, really high. So, a chain of custody solution using blockchain is a very natural fit. Could add a ton of efficiency, eke out a ton of cost and overhead. So those two are really, really interesting, because they actually solve a business need that cannot be solved if blockchain technology does not exist. And in general, I'd say we really look for those. We're like, don't be a guy with a hammer who's just looking for a nail. It's like, let's see if we can actually solve an issue, like increase efficiency, reduce cost, actually bring value to end users and customers.
Yeah. You mentioned one, the IP marketplace, right?
Yes, IPWE.
Yeah. What do you think about kind of the current atmosphere of NFTs and like the frenzy, kind of like the Wild Wild West, where anyone can make an NFT about anything, about any IP, any trademarked like content can be used as an NFT in the NFT. Sorry. What do you think about that and like the future implications of whether that stuff will be like removable in the future as because it's an NFT, or how companies kind of approach NFTs with that? I'd be interested to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I think with NFTs, we're just getting started. I think when people think about NFTs, they think like, NBA Top Shot or,
Right.
people. And of course, NBA Top Shot is an amazingly successful product. So hats off to them on that. But I think we're just getting started. There's so much more you can do with them. So, a good point you made is any sort of content can be NFT. So let's go back to the IPV case. They made an announcement about how they want to make an NFT for each patent. And so now you've kind of coded the object and, you've made it really, really immutable. But you can apply it to so many things. Like imagine, things like, so I play guitar and, imagine you were buying and selling vintage guitars and along with an RFID tag, you also had an online NFT on the blockchain. You could make sure that you're actually buying the instrument that you wanted to buy. Extend this to any luxury good or any good where the cost of putting an RFID tag, makes sense. You don't want to put it on a cheeseburger, but you could put it on a handbag or a nice pair of shoes. And therefore, things like reselling, you can create really new experiences. Like, for example, what if the original owner of like a really nice guitar says, every time you resell it, I want to get 10% of it. And you could wrap that in a smart contract. It's visible to everyone. People can choose whether they like that or not. But really the amount of like flexibility you can add to reselling and aftermarkets and secondary markets is huge with NFTs. So I think we're really just getting started. The current use cases are kind of interesting, but there are things you can do that I think could really, really be valuable and add real value to marketplaces and resellers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. I think right now a lot of people are just seeing like the art applications for it, whether it's people or like people who just get super rich from like having their artwork sold on super rare stuff like that. But I think that kind of clouds the grander applications for NFTs, and we haven't even seen like what else could be done. I think though, like, and I have this opinion that like with NFTs, as far as like the art perspective, it kind of just becomes like a popularity contest. Like I could put up a selfie of myself as an NFT, sell it for like $50. Kanye could put up a selfie, it sells for like thousands of ETH. You know what I mean? So it just kind of becomes about who you're buying it from, which kind of sucks because in the context of art, it's like there could be lesser known artists, but they have great art. But also on the flip side, Jake Paul could just pay some guy on Fiverr and sell it, for thousands of ETH.
Right.
Yeah, that's just the nature of the market, I guess. So kind of on some random questions here. We're just wrapping up. What job would you be doing if you weren't CEO of Casper?
I'd either be in academia, computer science, or a programmer, or I would have continued on Wall Street. So, I worked at Bain Capital in private equity for 3 years, and then at Cigar Capital for 5 years, along with the hedge fund. So I'd either be in finance or in academia.
What were your favorite parts about working there?
At CasperLabs, my favorite part is
on Wall Street. When you were on Wall Street, what were your favorite things about that you don't get now?
Well, it's more about at a startup we're all, which is also exciting. We're always innovating and trying to figure out better ways to do things. The one thing that's comforting on Wall Street is there's a process, right? There's a way to do a leveraged buyout. Yeah. There's a way to do a private equity transaction. There's a way to diligence a stock. Now, there are people who are bad at doing that process and good at doing that process, which is why some firms make monster returns like Bain Capital and some firms don't. But it's a little more regimented. And so I wouldn't say I missed that, but that is comforting. And at a startup, it's always like, hey, we don't know what works. Our company is young and the industry is young. So it's both a young company and a young industry, and we need to figure out how things ought to work. Yeah. And I'm excited about the fact that we've been able to get the type of traction we have with enterprises, but we're learning every day on how to make this better and better and better and better. So that's the biggest difference, I'd say. There's much more tweaking of processes and how we run things than there was on Wall Street, which is, you know, a very old industry that's fairly regimented at this point.
Yeah, yeah. What's your favorite food?
Oh my God, that is a really tough question because I really like food, but
Top three.
so probably Indian, Peruvian, Spanish, and Japanese are my favorite.
Sure,
Oh,
sure.
and Italian. Actually, if you let me go on, I'll probably list every cuisine in the world. I haven't really found a cuisine that I've like absolutely not liked. So you
Right,
know,
right.
everything done well can be great.
If you could have like a final dinner, final dish, what would it be?
It'll probably be my mom's lamb stew. Yeah, just you know, when you're going out, if you're just having one dish, you probably want something comforting. So that would be, you
Yeah.
know, I've eaten that hundreds of times. I love it. Would definitely have
What's your favorite candy?
that. I like any chocolate that has hazelnuts in it. So whether it's a German Milka or, you know, Italian Venki, like if it has hazelnuts in it, I usually like it. So hazelnut chocolate.
Sure, sure. Um, what's the last emoji you used?
Uh, I think the hand raise symbol. Yeah, I think that was the last one. Yeah, I think someone gave a good update today and like had achieved something good. And I probably overused that emoji. In fact.
How do you feel about emojis? I feel like I like using them because I like using them in the ironic sense. Like I'll use like way too many emojis in a blank sentence because it's funny. But some people like they just use them in other contexts. So yeah, I think emojis are great. It's a really important tool.
Yeah, I think they're funny. I use it more in a funny sense. I'm more of a text guy. Like I type everything out, and I actually don't use a lot of acronyms. But you know, a well-placed emoji or a well-placed, you know, flood of them can be quite hilarious.
I think that the time that we get eventually when we get Bitcoin as an emoji, that's when we've gone mainstream.
Yeah,
That day
yeah,
comes.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, how do you relax after a hard day at work?
Um. Uh. Play guitar. Uh. Watch television with my wife. Those two primarily. Those are the most relaxing things for me.
What are you watching on Netflix or what show are you watching now?
Uh, been watching *Handmaid's Tale* on Hulu. Pretty harrowing, but interesting as well. Been rewatching stuff on Netflix. Caught a couple of episodes of *Chef's Table*. I find that show fascinating. I watch a lot of stuff on YouTube also. There's this really, if you're a science nerd, there's this really good channel called Kurzgesagt.
Oh,
Uh,
I do that one, the animated one. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah,
If,
yeah.
if I watch stuff like that in Vsauce religiously. So yeah, if you're into like science and things like that, those kind of shows are really interesting.
That was actually going to be my last question. What's the last video you watched on YouTube?
Kurzgesagt. It was what would happen if we nuked the moon?
Hmm.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'd recommend watching it because while it's an absurd question, it's funny like how many implications of physics and gravity it exposes. You know, sometimes like absurd questions like that. They also have one more, which is what would happen if you nuked the Mariana Trench? So those are the last two I watched. I watched them both back to back.
Cool. Pretty
And
cool.
the results are actually very different from what you think.
Yeah, yeah. I like those channels because it's like you can play out those ideas because it's animated, right? It's
Right.
something you could do in like real life. So yeah. You play any video games for that reason too?
Yeah. I play Dota too. I find it fun, but I'm not good. I play Turbo, so
Yeah.
because I don't have time, right? Turbo, you can just do like half an hour. So Dota 2 is fun. I find that fun.
Cool. So finally, is there any place that our listeners can find you online? I know you don't have Twitter, but is there any other place that people can find you online?
Telegram. Telegram, join the official CasperLabs channel. I'm in there quite often, and I usually try to be as responsive as I can. That's really the best place. Telegram, we have a bunch of channels on Telegram in different languages as well. That's the best place.
Cool. Okay, Mrinal, I just want to thank you again for your time and coming on to the episode. I really appreciate it, and hope to see some great things from you guys in the future with CasperLabs.
Thank you, Hector. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you so much for having me on.
Cool, cool. All right, let me just wrap this up here.